Okay, so let's get right into it. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on something that is absolutely critical if you're ever involved in a clinical negligence claim against NHS Scotland. We're talking about the Central Legal Office. Now, you might not have heard of them, but believe me, understanding who they are and how they operate it is essential.
So picture this. Let's say you or someone you love has suffered harm during medical treatment. You believe things went wrong, that there was negligence, and you decide you need to make a claim for compensation. The big question is, who exactly are you going up against?
Now, the most logical answer, the one everyone assumes, is that you're taking on the specific hospital where it happened, or maybe the local health board. It seems like a local issue, so it's got to be a local fight, right?
Well, that's where things get interesting, because that very logical assumption is completely wrong. The reality of how this works in Scotland is totally different, and honestly, it changes the entire game.
Here's the twist. In Scotland, it doesn't matter where you are or which hospital is involved. Every single clinical negligence claim against the NHS goes up against the exact same single opponent. And that opponent is the Central Legal Office, or the CLO for short. Think of them as the one specialized in-house legal team for the entire NHS in Scotland. They are the gatekeepers, the central command for pretty much every single case.
So what is this organization really? How does this central command for the NHS's legal defense actually work? Let's take a closer look.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. It doesn't matter if your claim is against NHS Glasgow in the middle of the city or way out in the Orkney Islands. A claim against any of the 14 health boards across the country is defended by the very same team, the CLO.
Now, this centralized system makes sense when you look at the money, too. See, any compensation that's paid out doesn't come from the local hospital's budget. It comes from a big national pot of money managed by the government, called CNORIS. So, because the money comes from one central fund, it makes sense to have one central team defending it.
Okay, so you've submitted your claim. What happens then? How does this powerful centralized team actually handle your case? Let's open up their playbook.
Well, the CLO follows a very careful, very methodical process. First, your claim lands on their desk. Then they get your complete clinical records, and I mean everything, every single note. After that, they hire their own independent medical experts to go through it all with a fine-tooth comb, and only after that deep dive do they decide whether to admit fault or fight the claim. This is not a fast process.
And here's the bottom line on their attitude. The CLO does not just roll over. Their approach is professional and incredibly thorough. If their evidence and their experts suggest they have a case, they will defend it robustly. That said, they aren't going to fight a losing battle. If the evidence clearly supports the claim, they'll negotiate a settlement.
Okay, so we figured out who this CLO is and how they work. But so what? Why does any of this actually matter to you, the person making the claim? Well, there are 4 huge implications. First, let's just talk about the sheer scale of what they're dealing with. The cost of clinical negligence in Scotland every year runs into the hundreds of millions of pounds. The CLO's #1 job is to manage that massive financial risk for the government, and you better believe they take that job very, very seriously. And look at this comparison. It really is a tale of 2 teams. On one side, you've got the claimants team, working from the outside, having to find and hire their own experts. And on the other side, you've got the CLO, armed with decades of experience, deep knowledge of the system, and, crucially, access to all the NHS records. From day one, it's a pretty significant imbalance of resources. So let's just recap their key advantages: massive legal resources and expertise, unparalleled institutional knowledge, a consistent, predictable strategy they've used time and time again, and then incredible inside access to information. This is the opponent you're facing every single time. So, after going through all of that, what's the one crucial thing you need to take away from this? What's the main point? It really boils down to this. The CLO is not a pushover. It is a well-resourced, experienced, and committed opponent. They are built from the ground up to defend NHS Scotland's position, and they will do it vigorously whenever the evidence gives them a fighting chance. And that leads to a really clear, unavoidable conclusion. You are facing a dedicated team of specialists who do nothing but these kinds of cases, day in and day out. Bringing a generalist solicitor to that fight puts you at a huge disadvantage from the very start.
So, we'll leave you with this final thought. When the other side is a highly specialized, deeply experienced, and well-funded legal machine, who do you want fighting in your corner?